On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, Russia and Ukraine agree to ship grain from Odessa, and then Russia attacks Odessa. I'm your host, Sal Mercoglano. Welcome to this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. So, yesterday I did a video based on the UNCTAD reports on the shipment of grain out of the Black Sea by Ukraine and Russia. And nearly at the same moment I posted that video yesterday, an agreement was brokered between Russia and Ukraine via Turkey to resume shipments of grain out of three ports, excuse me, out of three ports in the Black Sea. However, almost immediately, what we've seen is that agreement come under a lot of fire, let's say, because the Russians launched a cruise missile attack against the port of Odessa, which is the main port from which grain shipments would take place, including a missile that landed perilously close to the grain facilities. So we're going to take a look at that. But before we do so, if you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's jump into this story. So here's the story from Reuters, posted on GCaptain. Russia and Ukraine signed deal to restore grain exports. This is all across the news media, so you can find stories about this everywhere. The deal was brokered by the United Nations and Turkey. Russia and Ukraine didn't sign agreement together. They signed it via Turkey. Turkey was the intermediary here. And as I noted in my previous video yesterday on grain shipments out of this area, Turkey is really heavily involved in this for a variety of reasons, not the least of which they import 25% of their foodstuffs from Russia and Ukraine, and they have control over the Turkish Straits, which is the passage between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean and the rest of the world. So they have a big play here. The plan is to open up three Ukrainian ports, which I'll show you here in a second. And the goal is to get these shipments going. There's about 22 million tons of grain that is stuck within Ukraine at last estimates. And that grain has been stuck there for a variety of different reasons. Number one, the Ukrainians mined their own ports at the beginning of this conflict, shutting off nearly all trade and commerce out of the ports. They did that not to stop the flow of goods, but they did it to prevent the Russians from landing in the ports, doing a coup de main, landing very quickly troops in there via their amphibious ships that they had brought into the Black Sea. And so the Ukrainians did it for defensive purposes. There's also allegations that the Russians have laid mines in the area. And suffice it to say, it takes zero mines to create a minefield. All you have to do is have the threat of mines to create a minefield. And now what you have is no shipments going north into the Gulf of Odessa. And so this agreement would be valid from 120 days. And there are several key provisions in this agreement. Ships would arrive at Istanbul, be inspected to make sure they're not carrying arms or munitions to Ukraine. The vessels would then sail along a designated route to the three ports, load grain, come out, be inspected again on the return voyage, and then be permitted to sail. And there's a lot of other things that have to be taken care of before we get to that. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the problem was, even before this got off the ground, this story hit. Russian missile hit Ukrainian port, putting landmark grain deal at risk. So right from the very beginning, we see a problem here with this situation. I'm going to do a little split screen here and see how this works for us. So this is the Black Sea, brought to you by Marine Traffic. One of the things you'll notice here, from the Danube River, where the large anchorage of vessels are, all the way across to Crimea, this is down Sevastopol, you have kind of a huge empty sea right here. This is the Gulf of Odessa. This is the area that has been under contention. You have the Sea of Azov over here that the Russians have secured by taking Berdansk and Mariupol up here. But the in question are three ports here in the region, which I will zoom in here and show you. The largest one here is the port of Odessa right here, and then two smaller ports up here. And I'm not going to try my Ukrainian because it's absolutely terrible. But one up here, and then the other one down over here, Chomoronsk. I'm not even sure how to say that. But Odessa is one of the key ones here. And what you'll see over here is this attack that took place on the port of Odessa yesterday. So let me put this into context for what you're seeing here in this video. So go back here to the very beginning here of the video. I'm going to take the audio off of it for right now. And let's go ahead and let it play. There we go. So this is the video that you see right here. So you're seeing this huge explosion. This is believed to be caused by a cruise missile that came in. There was a report of 6 cruise missiles that hit Odessa. This would have been probably their caliber missiles that they've been launched from their submarines and surface craft. So a variety of different missiles. Where you're seeing this explosion right now is right around here, right around toward where this dry dock is pictured. You can see the breakwater right here. This is where you're seeing that explosion take place right there. See these kind of containers all lined up here, these cranes. That would be basically this area right in around here that you're seeing. But that's the area you're seeing right about there. We're looking at here. You'll see some more right to the left here, which you don't see, which is really interesting, is there is a largest vessel that's stuck in Odessa right now, the Joseph Schultz. She is a COSCO, a Chinese overseas shipping company vessel. This is her right here. She has been stuck in here since the very beginning. And she has been there the entire time, even though she says MSC. She's actually she's been leased over to Costco. Let me go ahead and head back over to here. So we'll let this video play for a minute. You see that explosion of the missile right there. You can see kind of a little panning around there a little bit. And then you come over to here. These are the grain facilities. These are part of grain facilities. These are them right here, what you see. These are the large silos with the grains in it. Now, there's 2 areas here in Odessa. There's this area and then another one just over to the east a little bit more where there's more grain facilities. And you can see it over here on this pier structure right here. But this is the area right here where close by where they're hit. As a matter of fact, if we let this play just a little bit more, you'll see them pan back for a second. There is a couple of vessels that you see right there. There's one right here, and then there's another one. Let's pan back here for a second. Another one right there. And when you look at the AIS, one of them is showing, not this vessel, but this vessel over here is showing. That's her right there. That is the Navy Star, a Panamanian bulk carrier. Now, a lot of issues that need to be addressed with this, but you can see how close they came to hitting the grain facility there in Odessa. This was not targeted not to hit it. I mean, they're hitting in the general area. An explosion that fairly close to the grain facility, especially if it was happening during loading of grain operations, could be cataclysmic. Let me be clear. Loading grain is one of the most dangerous occupations there is in shipping right now. Grain, when it's loaded on board vessels, is fine dust when it gets in, and it creates a mist of fine dust that is extremely explosive. I know you tend not to think about corn and wheat being explosive, but when you turn it into a fine mist, all it takes is a spark. Fine dust will explode, and you could have a catastrophic disaster there in the port of Odessa. So you can't have missiles being hurled into ports anywhere near where loading is going to take place. All right. So for this to work, what needs to be done for obviously the shipment of grain to take place out of these 3 ports in southern Ukraine? So I talked about this in yesterday's video, and this is it right here. And I'll have links to the video right up here so that you can go ahead and take a look at it. First, the necessity of grain coming out is paramount. Everybody knows this. Again, watch this video. I talk about it intensely here in it. Just last week, myself, John Conrad from G Captain, went on the CAVASSHIPS podcast and talk about how we can get, what it's going to take to get the grain ships moving out. So if you want a much longer explanation than that, I recommend listening to the podcast because it goes much more in depth in this. What I want to give you is basically what I think the big issues are here. So obviously one of the biggest ones is the mines. You've got to get the mines out of the area. Now, Ukraine has laid the mines. Now, Ukraine should know where they laid the mines, but understand there are 3 different types of mines that potentially can be laid here. There's the classic contact mine. That's the mine you hit on the side of your vessel with the horns and boom, create an explosion. Those are the easiest ones to sweep in some cases because you send out a UAV, a underwater device, you find them, you attach munitions to them, and you explode them. And you get them. Back in the old days, they would tow cutting cables behind ships. That was really dangerous. But you have other types of mines. You have bottom mines, which are detonated by either pressure of the water going over them when a ship goes over them or magnetic. And those types of mines are really dangerous and very difficult to do. So, I mean, you got the pressure mines, you got the magnetic mines, you have contact mines, and clearing the minefields will take time. Now, the Ukrainians should know where all the mines are. However, mines, especially moored mines, don't stay in one place. We've seen multiple reports of loose mines showing up in Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey. Plus, the Russians may have laid mines. And so you've got to sweep these minefields, and that's going to take time, anywhere from weeks to months to clear them out. It depends on the amount of assets that can be brought to place. The Ukrainians and Russians don't have the assets, and no one's going to trust the Russians to do this. So this has got to be Ukrainians or allied. We're talking about NATO potentially coming in to sweep these mines. And so you've got to be able to get those out of the way. And if you don't do that, that's going to create a lot of problems. This story right here, Bloomberg, Ukraine's path to exporting grain involves clearing mines, finding ships, and trusting Putin. I think this one really surmises this a little bit, but I'm going to go in a little bit more detail than I do in this Bloomberg story because I think they miss a couple of things. So number one, you got to clear the mines. So that has to be done. That's going to require naval forces brought into the Black Sea. Next, you got to find the ships. You got to find ships to do this, which means companies, which means vessels, and it means mariners. And right now, the northern part of the Black Sea is a war zone. And that means you're going to be risking ships, risking crew members to go in there. And you got to get companies to sign on to this. But really, the big variable, I will say, in all of this is insurance. Who is going to insure these vessels? Now, all vessels have insurance, two types of insurance. There's P&I insurance, protection and indemnity, that's for the cargo. And then there's hull and machinery, that's for the vessel. Well, in both these cases, you're going to need war risk insurance. Typical insurance policies for vessels don't include getting hit by a mine, a cruise missile, or a torpedo. So that means that if that would happen, you would lose the vessel, the cargo, everything, and be a total loss. No one is going to take that chance, not with the track record that exists right now in the Black Sea. Russia has hit numerous commercial vessels at sea and in port in the region. They did it at the very beginning of the conflict, they did it during the conflict, and now we're seeing them loose cruise missiles into the port of Odessa. So no one is going anywhere until insurance can be procured for these vessels, until ships can be procured, and you can get crews to do it. Now, let me be clear. You're going to find ships and crews. You're going to find somebody. Someone's going to be crazy enough to want to do this, and they're going to pay mariners a buttload of money to do this, particularly because they use mariners from countries that don't make a lot of money. So it's not a lot of money to throw at these mariners. They're going to get it, and they're going to throw them at them, unfortunately. And that's going to be the issue at play here. But you got to get the insurance lined up to do this. You've got a couple of things that you have to worry about. I did a video on this where I talked about this. If these vessels start sailing there, and there's a couple of variants for how you do this. Do the ship sail independently there? So let's take a grain, an ore carrier. Ore carriers are big, huge, voluminous vessels. They have large cargo holds that are empty. And so when you sail them to, let's say, Odessa, and you hit a mine, whether it's a contact mine, a magnetic mine, a bottom influence mine, if you hit a mine, you've got a couple of things you have to worry about. Number one, in an empty ship, it's not as critical, I would tell you. You're going to pop a hole in the side of the ship. You may, if you go right underneath one of these or right over one of these mines, and one of these mines are underneath you, could potentially break the back of the vessel, which would be cataclysmic. But if you punch a hole in the side of the vessel from a mine, missile, bomb, whatever, you're going to flood a hole that's designed to carry grain. It's actually not an ending scenario for a vessel, especially a grain carrier. You'll put a lot of stress on the vessel. You could conceivably cause cracks in the vessel, but it's not an end for the vessel. If the vessel is loaded and coming out and hits one, that's, I would argue, worse, because now you're loaded down with grain and now water's coming in and you're churning it into oatmeal mush. You're increasing the density of the cargo, the volume of the cargo. You're putting strain because it's swelling. That's a potentially worse. But again, the worst case scenario would be hitting these vessels while they're loading in port. They're basically fuel air explosives in some cases because of the dust associated with them. But again, the danger becomes here that if they start hitting these vessels coming in and out, you're going to escalate this situation. Both sides have now signed an agreement to move vessels to these ports. And Turkey and the UN will be looking for some nation or nations to help this. And does the Black Sea turn into the next tanker war of the 1980s? It's an issue that needs to be addressed. You've got to do the convoy operation. Will this involve NATO forces coming in to do a convoy operation? Will they have to do it? I did a video on this where I used the Tom Hanks analogy. We use Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks in Outcast is a FedEx employee, and his goal is to get the package there on time. And the issue becomes, well, what scenario are we going to use for our ship operation? Are we going to be doing Captain Phillips, where the merchant ship sails alone and is at the mercy of the elements around them? I'm the captain now. Or is this going to be a Greyhound scenario where Tom Hanks will have to pack Navy ships around large convoys and escort them to and from the ports in Ukraine? I don't know. But this is a scenario that needs to be ironed out because we don't know what the final situation is going to be. The attack today on Odessa is a problem because the Russians have agreed to open up those ports. Now, they can make the argument, well, the agreement's not in place yet. No ships are sailing there, and therefore they will halt attacks prior to the arrival of the vessels. Well, it's going to be very difficult to find ships, crews, insurance to underwrite these vessels and get them there. So this whole situation, which sounds great that, everyone, was taking victory laps yesterday, that grain's going to start flowing out of the ports in Ukraine. Now, grain is coming out of the southern Ukraine ports on the Danube, Ismail, Remy, but not enough in large volumes. You need to get these large grain ships into ports like Odessa and the other two ports in the area to do this. And the question really becomes, what happens going forward? This scenario of a contested sea is something new for us. Bruce Jones, in his book, To Rule the Waves, How Control of the World's Ocean Shapes the Fate of Superpowers, is very applicable to this. If you hadn't read Bruce Jones's book yet, I strongly recommend it. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos when they come out. Take a moment, share it across social media, put it up on Facebook, put it up on TikTok, put it on Instagram, put it on Twitter, put it on whatever medium you use. But go ahead and get it out there so others can watch it. And if you can, support the page by either hitting that super thanks below or heading on over to Patreon and becoming a patron of the page. That allows me to put these videos together for you. Until our next episode, this is Al, signing off.